All right. What is up, everybody? I got a new setup here today. I am in my new spot. I am in downtown Kansas City in the Crossroads for anybody who is familiar with that. Pumped about that because I am no longer living with my mother. Love you, Mom. It was great. But I am on my own, and I'm now doing the first YouTube live show here in the new spot. So let me know if anything's off, if anything sounds weird. I think I've got this looking pretty good. Although you'll notice the picture behind me is different because in this moving process, I'm not 100% sure what happened right now to my good old Bill Snyder era poster that I had behind me. So I'm going to have to try and find that. But for right now, a little more generic look there. But I feel like the setup looks good. I feel like it looks pretty cool. Anyway, we're going to be talking a lot about everything that's transpired today, which is a lot. And it starts with right now the Oklahoma Sooners hiring Brent Venables. That is the hyper new news of the day, which pretty much every live show for the last 2 weeks has been coming fast and furious at us as there's been so much news with the coaching carousel, with the playoff, with the games that actually happened this weekend. And again, I feel like the games will get somewhat buried by everything else that's happening that typically drives more of our interest. But I am actually of the opinion that Oklahoma, to me, Brent Venables is a little bit underwhelming, and I seem to be in the minority on that. So we're going to discuss that. I'm going to give you the rundown here. And boom to the Sooner. I see you already in the chat. I am definitely curious for your take and your opinion on Brent Venables being the hire at Oklahoma. This isn't quite crimson. It's more maroon. The white balance on the camera is making it come off a little more crimson. It's actually like a KC Monarchs type of shirt that I'm wearing in honor of Buck O'Neil going into the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame today. If anybody knows the significance of that to Kansas City, certainly you can respect that. But I digress. Get in here in the chat. I'm going to run down through everything else that we're going to talk about today outside of Brent Venables in Oklahoma, which is what I'm going to start with. I will do that here in just a moment. It took a long time. I know Oklahoma fans and media were waiting for a long time for that hire to actually happen, and it did. It's now here, and I seem to be kind of in the minority on my opinion and take on Brent Venables and Oklahoma. So, all right, there is number one. Let me remind you, if you get in the chat, you can definitely offer your opinion there. It's fun. It usually gets pretty lively here throughout the chat. But if you want to make sure your question or comment gets my attention and gets up to the top where I can see it, you can donate by clicking the $ below the chat box where it says say something. If it's $5 or more, it will stick up at the top for me and I will be able to see it. I always forget to put that disclaimer out there as well, but also just a way to support the content that I am doing here on the YouTube channel. So fill it up. And again, questions or comments, if you want to get my attention, click the $ below the chat box to donate. I am doing this right now with the Chiefs currently playing right now. So that's how much I love you guys. That's how much I love college football, more importantly. Not that you guys aren't important to me. But college football is extremely important to me, so we are here. Outside of Venables, here's a quick rundown of everything else that I plan to get to today. Cincy gets in, man. Congratulations to Cincy. Cheers. Swig of water for you. The playoff committee was essentially forced to put Cincinnati in based on everything that happened. And that is not me at all devaluing the merit of Cincinnati being in there. They deserve to be in there. In fact, I think Cincinnati should be number 3 in the college football playoff poll, but that's another discussion for later on here. I also think Baylor should have received much more consideration and should have been compared up against Georgia's resume. That is something else to talk about here. And I just hated during the selection show today, Kirk Herbstreit doing, I saw Stats of War, who's a great follow on Twitter if you're into analytics or just Big 12 football in general. Like I would highly suggest following Stats of War, but he put it that way, that like ESPN was gaslighting everybody with how they were talking about Cincinnati. They broke this ceiling. Everybody said, no, they would never allow a group of 5 team in, and now they did. You guys are all idiots. No, it's very much gaslighting because ESPN has been a part of this whole thing, and the playoff committee the entire way has always discounted these group of 5 teams easily. Teams that were very deserving, and now to turn around and say, well, here's an instance where they had literally no other choice but to put Cincinnati in, or else they would have just been whitewashed with criticism from everywhere. I mean, they're just, with Notre Dame being the next team on the outside looking in, the same or a lesser record and a head-to-head loss, there was just no way they could do it, right? So I think that whole point was just ridiculous. very disingenuous and disappointing, frankly, coming from Kirk Herbstreit. But we can get into that. A part of the rankings that drove me nuts, Ohio State being ahead of Baylor in the final rankings is so dumb, and the committee just cannot get over this love fest with Ohio State. I digress. You had to know that was going to really wear on me. We can try and start some initial breakdowns here of Cincy versus Alabama. So Cincy's in the dance, right? They're in the thing, but can they actually win against Alabama? I think this is a more vulnerable Bama team than certainly we've seen in a long time, but they also looked excellent, obviously, in dismantling what we now know to be an overrated Georgia team in the SEC championship game. I've got a big picture point here on the ACC. Can the ACC become now the new Pac-12? I feel like with some of the coaching moves and everything that's happening right now, the axis of power could really be shifting a little bit, at least among the three kind of have-nots right now in the Power 5 college football world. Not the Big Ten and the SEC, but everybody else. I think because of what's happening at Clemson with Venables now leaving and some other things going on there, that could be the case. We could have Clemson falling off a little bit, and now the ACC will be the conference that goes a long time without a playoff appearance, and Lincoln Riley is coming in to potentially save the Pac-12. I think that is worthy of discussion. I've gone all the way through this, and we haven't even gotten to Oklahoma State in the Big 12 championship game, and what an excellent game that was. Baylor, again, another cheers. Congrats to Baylor, Big 12 champs. What an unbelievable year right now for Baylor. They have the reigning Big 12 men's basketball, women's basketball, and football champions. They obviously are the defending national champions in college basketball as well. And it was a phenomenal game that I think should really spark some hope in the future of the Big 12. There was a really good article from Max Olson in The Athletic about just that I think was really poignant about the future of the league in light of Cincinnati and in light of the football that was played there, even though Oklahoma State missed their shot at the playoff by losing that game. And we've got bowl games, people. We've got bowl games, and there are not only some really intriguing matchups. How about Mike Leach having to go play Texas Tech? My K-State Wildcats taking on LSU. I actually am excited about that, even though that's very dangerous. But as far as bowl matchups go, it doesn't get much more exciting than that in terms of an opponent that you can play for a school like K-State. But we also have, one of the most laughable things I've ever seen from a Notre Dame reporter on a conference call talking some smack to the Big 12. If I don't get to that by the end of this, somebody needs to remind me of that, because I definitely need to rant and rave about that. Okay, so there is the rundown of what is happening today. Once again, if you want to get your question or comment up to the top of the chat, you can donate by clicking the $ below the chat box there. So we're off and running. Brent Venables is hired at Oklahoma. That has now been confirmed by multiple accounts. It started early on in the day with a couple of reporters, same national guys, Bruce Feldman, Pete Thamel, all these guys that have been on the case the whole time, saying that Oklahoma was basically zeroing in on Venables. There was a picture, and I have to commend, it was like TigersIllustrated.com, one of the Clemson fan sites. Somebody staked out in the bushes Brent Venables' house, and they got a picture of Joe Castiglione, Oklahoma's AD, walking into Brent Venables' house, getting out of a car and walking in. It was crazy, man. Some real stalker paparazzi stuff, but thus is the college football coaching carousel. And so Brent Venables is going to Oklahoma. Joe Castiglione, Oklahoma's AD, he tweeted out like a padlock, assuming meaning he's locked down his guy, locked down his coach. So we have some confirmation there that this is indeed happening now. I think everybody can rest assured that it is pretty official for Oklahoma hiring Brent Venables. Now, let me say this off the top. I think the biggest winner in all this, and one point that deserves to be made, is that Brent Venables played this extremely admirably. And when I say this, I just mean his career. So I'm pretty keenly insightful on this, because it's long been the big-time dream of K-State fans to have Brent Venables come back to be the coach at K-State. He played at K-State under Bill Snyder in the very early years. He then coached at K-State on some of the best teams K-State has had, including the 1998 team, which is the best team in college football history to not win a national championship, and then left to go to Oklahoma. Obviously was at OU for a while before going to Clemson, and now is coming back. So because of the K-State connections, that was always the thought. That is for years. Like a decade plus, it has been the dream of K-State fans to have Venables be the guy. So I have followed his career. I'm pretty well-versed in some of the opportunities that have come his way. He obviously has turned K-State down a time or two. And unfortunately for the Wildcats, that never worked out. it's a hire I would have been crazy about here at K-State. I'm not quite as crazy about it at Oklahoma with the resources that they have available to them. But if you are Venables, the way he's handled his career, from cutting his teeth under Bill Snyder, learning a lot there, a guy that's really tough to work for, especially early on, like in the early Bill Snyder days when Venables was first getting going there. I mean, just brutal hours, never being able to see your family. Bob Stoops has some good passages about it in his book, if you ever want to read that. And so you know that like Venables really became what he was or started down that path by learning from one of the best in Bill Snyder. Then he goes and coaches under Bob Stoops, does it with more resources, starts upping kind of his place in the college football world, gets to Clemson after a weird situation. I know the exit there at Oklahoma was a little bit weird. But after that happens, he goes to Clemson and becomes, has he always been the highest paid coordinator in college football? He has certainly been one of them, but was just making great money, like making seven figures to be the coordinator at Clemson, which is, I mean, you don't have to deal with the pressures of being a head coach. You're going to the playoff all the time. You're getting experience coaching in these huge games. You're winning national championships. Just so much happening. Venables has what, 3 titles now? He has 2 with Clemson, 1 with OU, and turned down job after job, like jobs that would have been one. I mean, I would say he was kind of ahead of the curve in that line of thinking, right? Because now we're starting to see more coaches not just jump at any job that might be considered somewhat of a step up if they know it's going to be a pressure cooker and they could be gone in 3 years. They're being a little bit more selective about these opportunities. Man, Venzy's been on that for a while. Like Venables has been on that for a while and passed up opportunities, waited for the right one while still making $2 or $3 million a year and winning national championships. And now he gets kind of his pick of the litter, like the job that I would imagine he really wanted in the back of his mind by taking the OU job. So Brent Venables is a very smart guy. I think that's been an excellent move for his career. And now he gets a chance to take over a job that is a great job that he's familiar with. Going to the SEC probably does not scare him as much, being a guy that's been at Clemson where they played all these high-level college football playoff sort of games. So in that respect, certainly a tip of the cap to Venables. And as a K-State fan that is happy to see a Wildcat doing well for himself, like I certainly commend him and I'm happy for him. Now, the part that I just, from Oklahoma's standpoint, I get the sell. I get why it's an easy hire to get behind if you're Oklahoma. This is a hire that kind of combines both the, hey, like former players really like this guy, along with he's a pretty hot name in college football circles. And somebody did tweet this to me, and I think it was the best pushback that I've received on my take that I'm kind of lukewarm on Venables at Oklahoma. And I was like, hey, man, he's been the hottest coordinator name in college football for a while. He just has turned down so many jobs over the years that everybody kind of moved on to other people. That's a good point. That is a fair point that I think is worthy of being made. Like if this hire happened 5, 6, 7 years ago, it would probably be perceived a little bit differently by me because Venables would have been like a hotter name. You know, like Kirby Smart going to Georgia, like that was a really hot name at the time. They go get that big time coordinator, make the hire. It's pretty lauded. Similar type of deal here with Oklahoma. It's just that everybody, you know, people just moved on assuming Venables was not going to take any of these jobs because he's just always passed on everything, which obviously turned out to be the right career move. So that is fair. But I think it's a combination of like Oklahoma has the resources that you would think they would be able to go out and really compete for just about anybody in college football. There are 2 head coaches that have been mentioned for about every single job opening for the last 3 or 4 years, just still sitting there available. And I don't know, certainly there had been some talk behind the scenes. Oklahoma had at least had discussions with Matt Campbell being one of those. Luke Fickell is the other, obviously at Cincinnati. And there were some complications there now that you'd probably have to wait until the end of the playoff run to actually hire him away from Cincinnati. Like those are a couple places to start. I also think when you just hold them up against what other Blue Bloods did outside of Notre Dame, which made a fairly similar kind of hire in just elevating a guy that everybody in the program really loves, in Marcus Freeman, you know, you look at what LSU did going out and hiring Brian Kelly, just hired gun, go get the best dude that you can get, go get the best football coach that's out there. And then USC, just the home run of all home runs, being able to pull Lincoln Riley away from Oklahoma. It just feels to me like Venables is a step below that, not as exciting, not as much of a sure thing I think that's really what it comes down to me. Not as much of a sure thing. Like I would think Oklahoma right now would be able to pull a sitting head coach from somewhere and somebody that's a really hot name, as opposed to like, hey, Brent Venables, we'll have to find out if you actually can be a head coach. That will be a big part of this. Now, a lot of times it works out. It worked out for Oklahoma when they hired Bob Stoops. So there's a very good chance that all my tweets today, which it wasn't anything crazy, but just my tweets saying, hey, I'm a bit underwhelmed by this for Oklahoma. They could come back on Old Takes Exposed very easily 5 years from now, because it's worked with Stoops. It worked with Kirby Smart. Like there certainly is a blueprint where this does work. And Venables was as hot as can be 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, whatever, in the college football timeline of everything. So could very well be wrong. But other people had asked me, like, who would you go with? Who is the better hire than John? And I would just say, it feels like, although I think Matt Campbell is slightly overrated, that seems to me like a sure bet. This is a little bit more risky to go with the coordinator that has never been a head coach before. And then, to me, like Fickell is, I would just, if I were Oklahoma, I would have thrown everything I could at Fickell. Maybe there was no reciprocal interest there at all. I know Cincinnati fans, I'm sure, would tell me that. But I also think it's just such a big job. Like you should be trying that out. Matt Rule was thrown around there for a while, and I know it sounds like he kind of turned the job down. I mean, that's the kind of thing where I would think Oklahoma could pull somebody like that, somebody of that ilk. But they weren't able to. And I think if Jeff Lebby is going to be the offensive coordinator with Venables, which is what's been rumored out there, he's the OC at Ole Miss right now. There are a lot of positives to that. He's a very good offensive mind. He was on those Baylor staffs with Art Briles, but therein lies another part of the problem here. Oklahoma may have to deal with some controversy if they do make him the hire. But that on paper, like I understand how that sounds appealing. I guess the final piece of this to me, as far as it concerns Oklahoma and Venables, is just let's hold this up against what they had. They had Lincoln Riley. I think Lincoln Riley is much more proven, much more exciting, has a ceiling that's as high or higher. I would say a higher ceiling based on what we've seen than what Venables and Lebby would have. And that's who you just had, and you lost him as head coach. I saw a tweet today, and it's an Oklahoma media member that I really do respect a ton. And this is just a matter of, difference in opinion here. But it said, like, I thought going into this hiring process that Oklahoma, I'm trying to remember how it was phrased, that Oklahoma could be better off long-term without Lincoln Riley. Now I think they'll be better off short-term and long-term with the hire of Venables if he's bringing Lebby. I don't know, man. I don't see that at all. I still think this is going to take some work. I think if you're really going to rebrand the identity here and be more about defense with Venables and then have someone else take care of the offense, I think that will take a little bit of time to adjust. I don't think that just happens automatically, and you're better right now. So those are really all of the reasons. Those are all of the reasons why I come down where I do on Venables. There may be a part of it too where I'm just a little bit biased and just different as a K-State fan because I spent so long with myself and a lot of people just really wanting him to be K-State's head coach. And I mean, look, no offense to K-State, to my school, but that is not the same level of Oklahoma. A home run hire at K-State is not going to be a home run hire at Oklahoma. So that probably has tainted it a little bit in my mind here too. And it's not even, I know a lot of people would hit me back with, sour grapes, you guys didn't get Venables. It's not even really that. I mean, I would have loved the guy to be the coach. I would have been excited about the hire, but I was not in the camp. I mean, there are some people like that is just their ultimate, my guy Cole, love my guy Cole, who I host shows with, but man, that is like his ultimate guy, his ultimate dream. I was never quite there with Venables. Would have really liked it, would have really enjoyed it, but it was not like my ultimate dream. So there it is. That's really my take on Oklahoma. I think they have downgraded as a program from where they were at under Lincoln Riley. We'll see. Time will tell. Considering the choices that were out there and what the interest may have been, this ultimately may have been the best play that Oklahoma really had available to it. And if it's going to come with a major offensive coordinator hire, then more power to you, Sooners. But I just didn't think this was as exciting as I would have expected at the beginning. And especially then I'm almost left wondering, like, the fact that it took as long as it did, because we're at what, like about a week? It was literally like a week ago that Lincoln left. So it took about a week for that to happen with Oklahoma. I would think if Venables was truly the guy, like the number one guy, and you said, like, this is the best we're going to do, this is our guy, this is who we want, it all would have been wrapped up quicker than a week. Would not have taken a week. So that tells me that, like, a Matt Rule, Matt Campbell, Luke Fickell, like, some guys may have turned this down and you had to come back to Brent Venables. So I don't know. That's where I'm at. I see people disagreeing with me. I see Max, which Max Force, by the way, is one of the coolest names I've ever heard. Max Force. That is an awesome name. Says you're wrong, Kurtz. This is a blessing. All right. Hey, Oklahoma fans, you guys all seem to be really happy. So listen, I would say I hope you're happy. I really, you guys have had so much winning. This is not like a fan base that I'm truly like happy for if they're excited for their hire. Like, whatever. That's great. You guys are happy. Oklahoma fans seem genuinely pretty enthused by this. See what happens. It'll be interesting to monitor. I'm probably not going to have to worry about it too long as you'll be off to the SEC. But I'll just say this. This is not a hire where I go, oh, man, they're going to really run the SEC here in 5 to 10 years. But I digress. Boom to the Sooner. Thank you for the donation. Boom to the Sooner. Always in here. Always loyal. Oklahoma fan says, who should have been Oklahoma's new coach and why is it Bob Stoops or Brent Venables? Well, look, I'm happy for you. I will say that, Boom to the Sooner, because you're definitely a good dude. You've been in here in these chats a lot, and you've been pretty steadfast in being on the Bob Stoops train. I would imagine that anybody that's on that train would be pretty excited about Brent Venables, being that he is a Stoops disciple, former Stoops assistant. I can definitely see why that would be your guy, and why you're really excited about this here at this point in time. So, hey. I don't know, man. Like, Boom to the Sooner. I don't know, with Venables, I'm almost like, maybe it should have just been Bob Stoops. I feel like I maybe would have been more excited about Bob Stoops as the hire after all this, but I don't know. It will be crazy to see. I will say one of the weirdest things, Boom to the Sooner, to see today was someone put a screenshot on Twitter of the Alamo Bowl press conference. Like, these bowl games, when they get announced, they'll always do like an initial press conference. Sometimes a teleconference. Now these days we're seeing Zoom everywhere, but they'll do a press conference with the coaches just answering some questions in the immediate aftermath of the announcement being made. And there was one where it was Bob Stoops and Mario Cristobal. Just seems so awkward where it's like, oh yeah, Bob Stoops, I forget he's the interim, like he's the guy doing that. And then Mario Cristobal, with like everything happening with him right now in the Miami situation, it's just like, man, what a wild time for college football and for those two guys to be dealing with what they're dealing with on a press conference like that, or a conference call. But apparently they did not let media actually ask questions there or something, which is very weird. Very weird. Anthony, I see John Tilley's got 3 rings. I'll rest my case. Yeah, I mean, look, I understand Venables has 3 rings. You know, that's as an assistant. But yes, he does. He does have 3 rings. He does. If you guys want to make sure that your question gets up to the top, your question or comment gets up to the top, you can donate by clicking the $sign below the chat box where it says say something. Also, just a great way to support the channel if you do enjoy the content that I put out here. I forgot, I saw Zach's go by because, again, Zach, if it's less than 5, it doesn't stick to the top. But I saw this, and I want to make this point. 4 K-State fans, of which I'm sure there are some in here. Jaron Kanik is the best football player in the state of Kansas, 4-star recruit who had been committed to Clemson. Brent Venables using that Kansas cachet to go land him to play at Clemson. I do wonder about that, Zach, and I don't know what specifically is in play there. He's also really tight with like Caden Crawford, another really good player in state who's going to Iowa. I heard like a little bit of chatter of maybe K-State getting back in the picture there before signing day comes up. We will see. I certainly would not call it a lock or anything that he's going to K-State, but maybe that recruitment opens up wider and he reconsiders a couple of other options. It did seem like K-State was pretty close. It did seem like K-State was pretty close before he committed to Clemson. So, yeah, I wanted to make sure that I addressed that and got that in there. So, all right. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of good discussion here about Venables in the chat. I understand that the point that you're making is that Lincoln Riley has no rings. Lincoln Riley has also been a head coach in the college football playoff. Brent Venables has not done that. So it's a lot different when you're the head honcho, and Venables was a guy who did, I mean, maybe this is something too, like Venables most of these guys that are so driven to want to be head coaches, like they'll go out and take the job and do it. They would not have sat and waited around as long as Venables did. Now he parlayed that into Oklahoma. I just praised him for the way he's handled his career. That's all good and well, but a lot of these guys that are like so driven that they're going to be at the top of the sport and as competitive as the top of the sport is these days, I don't know. I would rather have seen him be a guy that was like chomping at the bit just to be a head coach and go take a program over like that. So I digress. We'll see. Oklahoma fans, you may very well be able to laugh at me fairly shortly. Very, very well could happen. Let's move on to Cincinnati. All right. Congrats to the Cincinnati Bearcats. They get into the college football playoff. They are the number 4 team in the college football playoff rankings. And they deserve, above all else, just a hearty congrats for really taking that game by the horns in the second half against Houston. It was a tight game in the first half. Cincinnati absolutely grabbed control of that in the second half with a lot of big plays. All 3 phases of the game really contributed for Cincinnati. I was pretty stoked to see the Bearcats do what it is that they did. And frankly, at the end of the year here with the unbeaten season, win at Notre Dame and then the wins over SMU and Houston rather emphatically here at the end of the year. I mean, like Cincinnati played good football. For all the talk there in the middle of the year where they went through that lull where they just weren't winning games by 30 points every week, for all of that talk, man, they turned it on at the end of the year when the schedule really ratcheted up, when that difficulty ratcheted up. And they deserve to be commended for that. And I think that's an easy thing to forget here as all these narratives kind of played out over the course of a season. So shout out to Cincinnati for doing that and locking it down. And they have, in every sense of the word, earned what it is that they put together here. Because, again, a couple of top 20, top 25 opponents that they smashed. They won on the road at Notre Dame. The only loss this year for the Irish. It snapped a 26-game home winning streak. They went unbeaten last year to go along with unbeaten this year in the regular season. The only loss in that time span was to Georgia in a game that they should have won and just kind of blew at the end. I mean, that is as impressive as it gets for a group of 5 team, really, that we have seen in recent memory, at least. And they earned every single bit of that number 4 ranking in the playoff. In fact, I would argue their resume up against Georgia's, and I think Georgia got the benefit of a pretty easy schedule, a Clemson team that was down, playing them at the beginning of the year. They do not have a single top 15 win here at the end of the year as we look at it. I mean, I would have no problem putting Cincinnati ahead of Georgia in the college football playoff rankings. So I'm a little bit irked like that, and it just didn't seem like there was the problem to me was that there was just not enough discussion about Georgia's resume up against Cincinnati, up against Baylor, up against Notre Dame. I'll even include them in the discussion too. There just was not any discussion about that at all, and to me, that was very disappointing. That we could never get to that. Like the playoff, I was rolling my eyes, as I'm sure most of you guys can imagine. I was rolling my eyes as soon as the show started today, just the way it was being approached, where Reese, was saying there's no drama here. We all know the 4 teams. Maybe there's a little bit of drama about 1v2, but that's it. There's nothing here. And I'm like, God, like we can't have this discussion at all about Georgia I understand that they were dominant, but they played a Clemson team that was not what we thought they were going to be and just coasted off of that for a lot of this year and then had some okay wins. And that's basically about it. They went and played in the SEC championship game and got decleated by an Alabama team that had struggled to beat Texas A&M, Florida, LSU, Arkansas, like all these games. It's not like Bama had been burning the world on fire throughout this year. And they went and Georgia got pounded. Georgia got absolutely pounded. I think there should have been a lot more discussion there, but there was not. Boom to the Sooner. Let me work this in real quick. Again, if you want to donate and get your question or comment up to the top so you make sure I see it, you can click the $ below the chat box where it says say something to donate. Boom to the Sooner. Who has the stronger jawline, you or Brent Venables? Well, I will definitely give that to Brent Venables. Although, according to Twitter, this is a top 5% jawline in the state of Kansas. Brent Venables does have a better jawline than me. That is one hell of a jawline. I can't critique that part of the hire. I don't think Oklahoma could have hired a better jawline than what they did in Brent Venables. I will definitively step in front of the microphone here today and say that. No doubt about that in my mind. Here's the other part of the playoff show to bounce back to that into Cincinnati that just really drove me nuts. When Kirk Herbstreit got up there and started like mockingly, first of all, I feel like taking kind of a page from my book, like the mocking, dripping in sarcasm take. It's like, Kirk, that's kind of my game. You're supposed to be more professional than this. When he came out and was like, oh, where are all these people that said the committee would never put Cincinnati in? They'll never put a group of 5 team in because they're so biased against group of 5 teams. Blah, 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 blah. Like, dude, that is like the definition of gaslighting. I mean, look no further than last year where Cincinnati received zero consideration at all for the season that they put together. And their performance against Georgia, to me, backed up the fact that they merited some inclusion there. And then what they've done this year, to me, backs up how dumb it was last year that they got no real look at it at all. UCF in 2017. Like, this is not some glass ceiling that Cincinnati broke through. It is that the committee literally had a gun to their head. Like, there was nothing that they could have done. What was the committee supposed to do to leave Cincinnati out this year based on circumstances and the way everything happened? The next team out was a team that had one more loss than Cincinnati, and it was to Cincinnati at their home. I mean, there was just nothing. The committee was literally handcuffed. Nothing that they could have done to get away from that, to put anybody else in there. And even then, I mean, I feel like they still tried pretty hard to get Ohio State in there by putting the Buckeyes all of a sudden up at 6 here in the final rankings. But to me, it is so intellectually dishonest. It is ignoring what the history has been. It is ignoring what the history was earlier this year with where Cincy initially debuted in the playoff rankings to tell you like what the committee really thinks of group of 5 teams. There is still a big time level of disrespect there. And it will continue, and it will happen again. Like, you know, it will happen again. Cincinnati did the Notre Dame game, saved Cincinnati, obviously, here, and credit to them on all levels for that. Winning the game, scheduling the game, all of the above. But the next group of 5 team probably will not be that lucky to have it break down exactly like this. And then they will be criminally misrepresented, criminally underrepresented by the playoff committee in future years. I don't think this really changed much of anything at all. Now, maybe if Cincinnati goes in there and beats Alabama and plays for a national championship, maybe that will start to turn some heads. But I don't know. Even then, Cincinnati's going to be viewed as this team moving on to the Big 12. Like, they've kind of graduated beyond that. To me, it just all reeked of like just ESPN trying to stoke the fire and kind of propel these narratives that they're really pushing, and that I don't know. It's just like the company line stuff from Herbstreit there. The company line stuff, and to me, really felt like gaslighting everybody here that's experienced this and seen what it's been like for all these teams that have tried to get in there. So I didn't like that at all. That was very annoying. And you know, I mean, the committee at one point puts up this graphic, right? I should have pulled it up on Twitter. I have it here somewhere. It's a graphic comparing Cincinnati's resume to the resume of some other teams in consideration. Let me see if I can go find this real quick. It's not going to be under my media, is it? Okay. There's a quote tweet in here somewhere. Scott Stapp, Oklahoma, Oregon. Here we go. It's a graphic showing the resume of Cincinnati against Notre Dame and Baylor, which Reddit College Football said, LOL, they're actually showing this graphic. I mean, I agree with him there. LOL, they're actually showing this graphic because there's no comparison between Cincinnati and Notre Dame. And look, as much as I'm advocating for Baylor to be in this discussion, there's really no discussion there between Cincinnati and Baylor. Georgia is the team that should be on that. Cincinnati should have been 3rd. Georgia should be the team that was fighting to get in at number 4. And then we can compare the resume of Georgia to the resume of Notre Dame and the resume of Baylor. That's the way that this should have happened. That's the way that this should have gone down. Georgia has 0 top 15 wins. Baylor has 3. Georgia got spanked in its conference championship game by not your older brother's Alabama, not a quintessential Alabama team. Meanwhile, Baylor won the Big 12 by beating the number 5 team in the country. Strength of schedule for Georgia is 20. It's 34 for Baylor. Not that far off. I understand Baylor they have the TCU loss, and that is ultimately what, you know, to me, I kind of tongue-in-cheek put Baylor in my playoff on Twitter earlier today. I think when it came down to it, I'd probably put Georgia at number 4, but I think it warranted legitimate discussion, and we just don't even discuss it because it was an SEC team that was number 1 for all year that coasted off of a win that was not as good as it looked in week 1. And of course, like that's just how we all are in college football. We're going to let that stand and just let that go and just never question it. And so we didn't have time to question it when there was actually an opening to question here at the end of the year. That to me was incredibly, incredibly frustrating that never actually happened. So Baylor, I'm trying to stick up for you. The TCU, I mean, what a missed opportunity, unfortunately, for the league, for Baylor itself at the end of the year to have that TCU game happen. The fact that they lost just a WTF game to a TCU team that was falling apart. That was the first game for Jerry Kill as the interim coach after they had fired Gary Patterson. It's a head scratcher, and it's a regrettable game at the end of the year for Baylor. And we could have been sitting here happening. I mean, we're having today just a widespread discussion about Baylor or Cincinnati in the playoff, or if Oklahoma State had gained 6 more inches in the Big 12 championship game, then it would have been Oklahoma State or Cincinnati. And that would have been an interesting discussion to be having. Again, I think at that point I would have been even madder about what we were dealing with the Georgia part of the discussion here, and like, why are they not on the chopping block, but Cincinnati is. So there would have been some very annoying things that came along with that too, but it would have been cool to have the Big 12 more in the spotlight like that. A couple donations coming in here. If you want to donate and you want to make sure your question or comment gets up to the top so that I can see it, you can click the $ below the chat box where it says say something. All right, here is Davad. Davad, I always say David. He likes to give me some crap because I don't know how to actually pronounce his name. What up, John? Big 12 bowl games, not including OU or Texas. If they would have made it to one, LOL, early picks. Keep up the great content. I will definitely get to some of those. You know what? Let me just try and give you a brief rundown of some thoughts, just initial reactions. Like K-State LSU, for instance, I think is a really interesting matchup, and I'm excited for it as a K-State fan, but I have no idea, man. It's going to be all about like how much LSU wants to show up. And that to me is like completely unpredictable. Because K-State will want to show up. I already saw a video of the team being told that they were playing LSU. That they were excited about it. The team, K-State will show up being fired up, but it's will LSU actually want to be there? They're trying to audition for Brian Kelly. Do they care about this at all after their season? I would tend to think that they don't and lean K-State there, but I don't know. I mean, Mike Leach having to play Texas Tech, very interesting game. I'd go Mississippi State on that early on. What else do we have? Who is Iowa? Oh, Iowa State's playing Clemson in the Cheez-It Bowl. I would favor Iowa State there because I think who wants to be there more, who wants to play that game more. Clemson had a rough year. Now they lost their defensive coordinator. They're kind of in flux. That would be my initial read on that game. We've got Ole Miss Baylor. I hate to say it, Baylor. Maybe I'm too biased because I just really like Lane Kiffin, but I'd lean Ole Miss on that. What else am I missing? Who's Oklahoma? Oh, Oklahoma State, Notre Dame. Fascinating game. Marcus Freeman and the whole situation there with Kelly and Freeman has like actually turned Notre Dame into kind of an underdog story. As weird as that is, going up against Oklahoma State. I don't know if Spencer Sanders, but they're so pedestrian for an 11-1 team. Relatively speaking, if Spencer Sanders can just not turn it over 5, 6, 7 times, I think Oklahoma State should win that game. I think I've hit them all but one. Who's playing Minnesota? Somebody's playing Minnesota, right? West Virginia? Is West Virginia Minnesota? Man, I don't even know on that game. I don't even know. I'll say West Virginia just for the hell of it. So, yeah, there you go. There's a quick run through of Big 12 bowl games. Robert hits on one of the tough storylines today for the Big 12, and this being the new look Big 12 here. Thank you for the donation, Robert. I appreciate it. He says BYU should go to the Rose Bowl as Pac-12 champs. That would be awesome, and I think BYU deserves that, especially with the way that they got treated. Man, like that is a fan base that I truly do feel bad for today because BYU is going to the Independence Bowl, which just played in Shreveport, right? Shreveport, Louisiana. They're going to the Independence Bowl to play UAB. Nothing against UAB at all. They've done some really nice things as a program, and it's a cool story when the program was squashed there for a minute, and then they've come back and put together some nice seasons. But that is BYU being in the top 15 for most of the year, having the season that they had, another double-digit win season. That they are deserving of more. They're deserving of more, and I understand. I've been educated a bit on like the bowl contract for BYU and how, as an independent school, that's really one of the downsides of it. And you can get kind of screwed into things like this because of it. So I understand, and I think BYU knows the deal, and it's why BYU is excited to now be joining a conference where the bowl tie-ins are going to be better. But they definitely deserve better. That doesn't change anything for this team this year. That doesn't change anything for fans this year having to deal with that for BYU. And now you're in a situation like the other part of this that I always just hate for teams like this is you get sent into a situation where now everybody will be like, oh, well, BYU is going to win this game because they're way better than UAB. And now it's like, all right, well, how fired up are BYU's players actually going to be? You know, it's these bowl game settings where they're so volatile. You have no idea who's going to actually care about playing the game versus who won't. And it's very easy to fall into a trap where you lose a game that's a stupid one just because you were the less motivated team to be there. And most of the time when you're the team that's not as motivated to be there, you're taking on a team that is extremely motivated to be there and likes the fact that they're playing a name brand like that, which I would think UAB would feel that way about playing a BYU in that game. So you're not as fired up. You're getting a team that's going to be extra fired up, and then people will criticize you if and when you lose. So I feel bad for that. BYU definitely deserve better. You're gonna get better once you join the Big 12. BYU, I can promise you that. The bowl tie-ins, which I now am frankly a little bit tired of because they've been the same thing forever now in the Big 12, and I really wish that they would have switched it up. I am very tired of them by now, but for the newcomers, for the new guys, once they get to the league, I would think that's actually going to be a very, very cool thing. For some of them. So your time is coming, BYU. Your time is coming. I don't think it's going to be like this forever. All right, if you want to donate and get your question or comment up to the top of the chat, you can click the $sign below the chat box there where it says say something. If you have a question or comment here and want to support what I do here on this channel. Try and see what's happening in the chat here. BYU is never going to make a New Year's Six Bowl after the Boise loss. But what the crap with Utah and Pitt jumping them? Yeah, so I mean, that's the part of this that really stings, I think, if you're a BYU fan. You beat Utah. You won that game head-to-head. And now Utah, of course, by virtue of winning the Pac-12, is going to go get to the Rose Bowl and play that game, and you're stuck in Shreveport watching that. That's some of the zaniness of college football. We love the sport for some of the quirks and colloquialisms. Oftentimes, though, it is very dumb and frustrating if you're a fan because of those same very things. So I think that is a maddening part of it. Pitt, I mean, the problem with Pitt there is, I mean, look, Pitt won their league. That's how it works. I would actually be very interested in watching a Pitt v. BYU game. And Pitt is fun to watch. I will give Pitt that. I talk a lot of crap on ACC football, and generally that is the conference I'm least interested in watching. I would way rather watch Pac-12 After Dark than I would a typical ACC conference game. But that was an entertaining title game between Pitt and Wake with all the offense there. And, of course, Pickett with the fake slide touchdown run that he had, which was very funny as well. Funny. Very, very thought-provoking, because can we actually allow that to happen in games? I feel like we should not allow that to happen in games, but I digress. It was fun. It made for a fun game. I don't think you can complain much about Pitt based on the fact that they did win a conference, and that's where, BYU needed to join a conference. They do, and they have. I'm going to ask you guys real quick to do this because I realized it really helped out the other night. I think it was last Sunday when we had the Lincoln Riley stuff happening. If you could like the video, if you're somebody in here right now watching this, if you could like the video, that will definitely help me with the numbers, with the algorithm. If you can like the video, if you're somebody that is supporting what I'm doing in here, we got 300 people in here and like 50 likes on the video. That would really help me out. AMAC, I see the fake slide is not against the rules. It was brilliant. Oh, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. I will not take away from that, from Kenny Pickett. Like that was a brilliant move to do it. I just think in the future, we're going to need to get rid of that, because if the defenders just have to stop. They've been trained. They know to stop. And if they don't, if you even touch the quarterback, you're going to get 15 yards. If it's anything, we have all these targeting calls. Like, you can't do that to the defenders and then allow a fake slide like that to happen. That's just, I think that's very unfair. And I'm all for making the game a little bit more offensive and tilting it kind of there, but we can't. That to me is going too far. That is going too far. Oklahoma State fans, let me just give you this real quick. Oklahoma State fans, I feel for you. That is a gut-wrenching way to lose a football game. I don't think it's like K-State 1998 Texas A&M level, but that's still pretty bad. Like you very well may have been in the college football playoff. Maybe if you're an Oklahoma State fan, some of the sting was lessened by the fact that the Bama Georgia game went the way that it did. Because had Georgia won, it was like, well, then yeah, you definitely would have been in the playoff. Had that gone differently, and you had the extra couple of inches to get in the end zone there, as it stands, it would have been a debate and a fight with you in Cincinnati, but you could have been right there. And obviously, you lost out on a Big 12 title. So that is just painstaking, especially you've got 4 cracks at it, first and goal at the 2, and can't find a way to get it in. It is crazy to me. K-State experienced a similar thing with all these 4th and 3rd and shorts and just never QB sneaking anything. Like, I don't, could you have just had Spencer Sanders get up under center and sneak the ball a couple of times on 3rd and 4th and goal? That would seem to me to be a winning formula potentially there, but not what Gundy did. And it came up very, very, very close and just barely short for Oklahoma State. That is as gut wrenching as it gets, especially when it's happening to a team that you've already beaten that year. It's happening on a game in which Spencer Sanders is throwing like 25 interceptions. I mean, you just think back to some of that in the first half. Like if you don't have just the disaster of a start that Spencer Sanders did, like what does that game look like? But it all goes back to like what I said at the beginning of the year when talking about Oklahoma State and seeing how they were playing against Boise and some of those games. It's like, that is the Spencer Sanders experience. I kept repeating that to myself as I was watching that game unfold. I was just thinking to myself, like, that's the way that it should have gone. But Oklahoma State is still in a pretty sweet bowl game. It's not a bad consolation prize to go get the Fiesta against Notre Dame and get a chance to take on a storied program in flux. It's a type of game that schools like Oklahoma State, K-State, Iowa State, like they don't get to play very often against those type of traditional blue blood powers in the sport. So I certainly hope Oklahoma State enjoys that matchup at least. And speaking of that, this is how I will close here today. So that's your fair warning. If you have anything that you want to make sure we get in here before I leave, make sure and donate right now. Hit the $ below the chat box to get your question or comment up to the top. But I want to leave you with this. A Notre Dame reporter apparently on the conference call, the press conference that happens right after the bowl matchups get announced. Notre Dame reporter gets on there and says that the Big 12 plays, quote, street football and no defense. The Big 12 plays street football and no defense. And that is the most laughable thing that I have ever heard. First of all, the no defense part of this is just such an antiquated way of viewing things. Saying that the Big 12 plays no defense is just like your mom or possibly your grandmother telling you about how she just got on Facebook and is super excited about the fact that she is going to be hip and up to everything that is going on in the world because she just downloaded Facebook in 2021. Just got Facebook on the phone in 2021. You think you're hip and cool for that? It's so outdated. Like the Big 12 has been playing good defense for like 7 years now. This is no longer 70-63 Baylor, West Virginia, but that's just like burned in everybody's mind. And that is, I would imagine this reporter probably is a little bit older and probably is somebody that thinks Facebook is cutting edge these days. If you're going to roll with that as like the prevailing take that you have about Big 12 football. And not only that, okay, so there's layer one of how ridiculous it is. Layer two of how ridiculous it is the fact that Oklahoma State is the team in question here. A team that's played phenomenal defense throughout the year. A team that has basically been like just a half tick below Georgia defensively, but almost in the same caliber. The way that they have played defense this year, man, that is just so out of touch to be making that comment. And then three, what the hell does street football mean? What is that? Like, that sounds like your out of touch old grandpa talking about the inner city scaring him. Like, so much. And it is just the fact that is a Notre Dame reporter is just perfect. Wrap that all up in a bow, because what I would think about a Notre Dame guy is like living in the past dude that still waxes poetic about Rudy and is going to be talking about street football and everything I'm scared of and no defense and hasn't watched a Big 12 game in 10 years. Yeah, that's exactly what I would imagine out of somebody that is closely tied to the Notre Dame program. Notre Dame seems a lot cooler now with Marcus Freeman, but they're going to need to ditch some of that crap. They are going to need to ditch some of that crap with what's going on there. So I got a good hearty laugh out of that, and that made me like, oh, that made me really, really get behind Oklahoma State. Gonna need you to win that game, Cowboys. Gonna need you to really pound Notre Dame into the ground. Unlike our friends in Ames, Iowa, who got destroyed and mauled by Notre Dame a couple of years ago when they played them in a bowl game out in Orlando. Boom to the Sooner. I see street football as code for the Big 12 went undefeated in bowls last year. Yeah, and boom to the Sooner. I saw your question about Oklahoma, Oregon. I guess that was like the one game I didn't really discuss. That is another one of those bowl games that to me is just like impossible to predict. I mean, Oregon has just been awful, just getting absolutely destroyed by Utah twice to end the year. They have that loss to Stanford. They may be without a head coach. Like it sounds like Mario Cristobal is probably going to Miami, although that's a hell of a situation in and of itself. So you have two teams playing without their head coaches that they started the year with, both in disappointing scenarios that they're winding up in that game as opposed to the playoff. And let alone that, it's not even New Year's Six game. Like how motivated will those teams actually be? I have no idea what to expect on that. So I hate to give you like a cop-out answer. I don't know. I mean, Oklahoma, I think should have they would theoretically have better players, but is Caleb Williams even going to play quarterback? Is he still going to be there? I don't know, man. I do not know. That could be a game where it's just like I hope that both teams get there with enough players to like actually field a football team. I hope they're there and they have enough coaches and players to actually field a couple of football teams to go play that game. Finally, 69 Chevelle SS 396. Do you think Colin Klein would make a good OC? Well, we're going to find out. That's another intriguing part about K-State LSU in bowl season is that Colin Klein is going to be K-State's interim offensive coordinator because they did decide to go a different direction from Courtney Messingham, who fans had not really liked for a long time. Chris Kleiman's childhood best buddy, Courtney Messingham, or at least one of his really good friends dating back to childhood. He had to get rid of him. He did, and now Colin Klein gets an audition. I'm sure that's a name that most people still recognize here in this chat, whether you're a K-State fan or not. So that'll be intriguing. Do I think he would make a good OC? I think I need to see what he will be like calling plays. To be honest, and Colin's a guy that I certainly respect. And how could you not respect him after his college career? One of the toughest SOBs you'll ever come around. But I think the quarterback position, frankly, has left a little bit to be desired under his direction at K-State. Now, Skylar Thompson's had a nice career, and I do think he has developed, and the injuries have held him back a little bit. But to me, the biggest indictment on it right now is that they don't have a quarterback ready in year 3 of the program to go next year, to the point where Adrian Martinez was brought in this weekend, the Nebraska transfer, to potentially be a transfer portal guy to play QB next year. And they've had 10 starts for Will Howard, the backup that they could have been grooming. Jake Rubley, a 4-star recruit who came in, seems pretty far behind right now, disappointingly so. So all that stuff wrapped up to me seems like there's a lot to be desired in terms of how the quarterback situation has gone. And that's been his post where he's been coaching. Now, maybe that'll be way different, and offensive coordinator can be kind of a different skill set, I'm sure, which is calling the plays. We'll see what it looks like in the bowl game. I'm certainly open to seeing what that looks like. But I will just say, like, I would be more excited by, and Tech fans I know have kind of knee-jerk revolted on Twitter against me for this, but Matt Wells is another name that's been mentioned because he's really good friends with Chris Kleiman. Kleiman called him his best friend in the coaching profession. There had been some speculation about that. I would be way more excited about Matt Wells at this point, just getting somebody with that kind of experience and at least a legitimate track record at this level as an offensive coordinator. But we'll see. We'll see. I think Colin's a really bright guy. It seems like he's very well liked by the players. And I think the players are in favor of this move and him getting this opportunity here in the bowl game. So we'll see. Glad to see AMAC says he wishes Matt Wells well. You wish Matt well? Might have to end it on that. That was a pretty good one. That's going to do it for me, I think, folks. I'm going to have to go watch the Chiefs. Can someone give me like a Chiefs synopsis in 10 seconds or less before I leave here? These are always kind of fun. Get the game taped. I'm just going to go back and watch it from the beginning, but it's always kind of fun when I get the little synopsis from you guys on the Chiefs playing on Sunday Night Football. It feels like it's happened like 7 times this year where I'm doing the chat with the Chiefs here at the end. By the way, follow me on Twitter at JL Kurtz. If you have friends that you think would be into the channel, into Big 12 football, into college football in general, please tell them about the channel, spread the word, push it on social media, continue to grow this thing. I see Rob says, good Patrick is playing. I like that. All right, that's good enough for me. That is good enough for me. We've got good Pat Mahomes tonight. Look forward to watching that. I hope you all have a very wonderful week, and I will talk to you all soon.